The first Void Reaper ship to notice them was smaller than the others, but it was still 5 times the size of the Aegis Dawn. Its black hull was covered in sharp metal spikes, and red lights glowed along its sides like angry eyes. "They've seen us," Una reported from her station. "The scout ship is turning toward us." Captain Lee studied the enemy ship on his screen. It moved like a predator, slow and confident. It probably thought the human ship was just another refugee trying to escape. "Kim, can you get those mining lasers online?" "Already working on it, Captain." Kim's hands moved quickly over his controls. "But remember, these are meant for cutting rock, not fighting warships." "Rock, metal, what's the difference?" Lee tried to sound more confident than he felt. Dr. Park was monitoring the communication channels. "Captain, I'm getting a signal from the planet. The Thylaxi are trying to contact us. Put it through." The voice that came through the speakers was different from the recorded message. This one was real-time and full of disbelief. "Earth ship Aegis Dawn, this is Elder Verdanus. Are you really here to help us? Are you real?" Lee picked up the communication device. "We're real, Elder Verdanus. We received your distress call. We're here to help." There was a long pause. When Verdanus spoke again, his voice was shaking. "No one has come for so long. The hegemony said we were not important enough. The Trade Federation said we had nothing to offer. The Crystal Court said we were a lost cause." "Well, we're not them," Lee said simply. "What's your situation down there?" "Bad. Very bad. We have maybe 10,000 of our people left in the underground shelters. The Reapers have taken everything else. Our cities, our farms, our orbital stations, everything." Park was studying the planet on her sensors. "Elder, we're reading several groups of Thylaxi still moving on the surface. Are those evacuation teams?" "No," Verdanus said sadly. "Those are the ones who refuse to hide. They're trying to save what they can of our seed banks and genetic libraries, but the Reapers will find them soon." Lee made a decision. "We're going to try to buy you some time. Get your people ready to evacuate if you can." "Evacuate to where? We have no ships left. We'll figure something out. Just be ready." Lee cut the communication and turned to his crew. "All right, people, we're going to hit that scout ship before it can warn the others." "Captain," Una said, "that ship has enough firepower to destroy us in seconds." "Only if it gets a chance to use it." "What's the one advantage we have?" Kim understood first. "They don't think we're a threat. They probably think we're refugees or traitors." "Exactly. So we act like it. Una, take us in slow and scared. Make it look like we're trying to surrender." The Aegis Dawn changed course toward the Reaper scout ship. Una made their flight path look clumsy and desperate. The scout ship moved to intercept them, probably planning to scan them before destroying them. "Wait for it," Lee whispered. The two ships got closer and closer. The Reaper was so much bigger that the human ship looked like a toy next to it. "Now!" Lee shouted. Kim fired both mining lasers at the same time. The beams were meant to cut through solid rock, and the Reaper's hull might as well have been paper. The lasers punched through the enemy ship's armor and into its engine core. The scout ship exploded in a ball of orange fire. "One down," Kim said with grim satisfaction. But their small victory didn't last long. The explosion had been seen by every Reaper ship in the system. Alarms started going off on their ship as enemy sensors locked onto them. 12 ships incoming, Una reported. "Make that 15. No, 20. "Evasive maneuvers," Lee ordered. "Keep us close to the planet. Maybe we can use the atmosphere to our advantage." The Aegis Dawn dove toward the planet's surface with 20 Void Reaper ships chasing behind her. Energy beams lit up the space around them like deadly fireworks. Una flew their ship through the burning atmosphere, dodging between pieces of orbital debris and destroyed satellites. "Hull temperature is rising fast," Park reported. "If we stay in the atmosphere much longer, we'll burn up. If we leave the atmosphere, they'll shoot us down in seconds," Lee replied. "Keep us low." They skimmed over the planet's surface at dangerous speed. Below them, they could see the destruction the Reapers had caused. Entire cities had been stripped away, leaving only empty craters. Forests had been cut down and hauled away. Rivers had been drained. But they also saw something else. Groups of Thylaxi moving across the wasteland, carrying supplies and equipment. They were heading toward the underground shelters, trying to save what they could. "Captain," Park said, "I'm detecting a large group of Thylaxi about 50 kilometers ahead. They're out in the open. The Reapers will see them soon." Lee could see the alien refugees on his screen. There were maybe 300 of them, including many young ones. They were moving as fast as they could, but it wasn't fast enough. "New plan," Lee announced. "We're going to land." "Land?" Kim asked. "On the planet? With 20 enemy ships chasing us? They won't expect it, and maybe we can help those people get to safety." Yuna shook her head but started looking for a landing spot. "There's a flat area near those hills. It's close to the refugee group." The Aegis Dawn swooped down toward the surface. The Reaper ships followed, their weapons firing continuously. Energy beams scorched the ground around the landing site, but Yuna managed to set them down without getting hit. "Everyone grab weapons and emergency supplies," Lee ordered. "We're going on foot." "What weapons?" Kim laughed. "We have 4 pistols and some emergency flares." "Then that's what we use." They ran from their ship just as the first Reaper ground. Troops landed nearby. The Reapers were machines that looked like metal spiders, each one the size of a car. They moved fast across the rough ground, their red sensors scanning for targets. Lee and his crew ran toward the group of Thylaxi refugees. The aliens were tall and thin, with skin that looked like tree bark and eyes like large green jewels. They moved gracefully even when they were scared. "This way," Lee shouted to them in the trade language. "Follow us to the caves." Elder Verdanis was with the refugee group. He was older than Lee had expected, and he walked with a staff made from some kind of crystallized wood. When he saw the humans, his large eyes went wide with surprise. "You came down here? You left your ship to help us?" "That's what we do," Park said simply. She was helping carry some of the younger Thylaxi who couldn't keep up. Behind them, the Reaper spiders were getting closer. Their metal legs clicked against the stone as they climbed over the rocks. Energy weapons charged up with high-pitched whines. Kim turned and fired his pistol at the nearest Reaper. The energy bolt bounced off its metal skin without leaving a foe. "Mark, these things are armored." "The joints," Elder Verdanis called out. "Aim for the leg joints, that's where they're weakest." Kim adjusted his aim and fired again. This time his shot hit the connection between the Reaper's body and one of its legs. Sparks flew and the machine stumbled. "It worked," Kim shouted. But there were dozens of the machines, and only 4 humans with light weapons. They couldn't fight them all. "The caves are just ahead," Verdanis said. "If we can reach them, the machines are too big to follow us inside." They ran harder, but the young Thylaxi were getting tired. Some of the older ones were falling behind. The Reaper spiders were gaining ground. That's when Lee made another decision that would change everything. "You go ahead," he told Verdanis. "Get your people to safety." "What about you?" Lee looked back at the advancing enemy machines. Then he looked at his crew. Park, Kim, and Yuna were all watching him, waiting for orders. "We're going to buy you more time." "No," Verdanis said firmly. "You've already done enough. You don't have to die for us." "Nobody's dying today," Lee said with a smile he didn't feel. "We're just going to slow them down a little." The 4 humans took cover behind some large rocks, while the Thylaxi continued toward the caves. Kim found that their emergency flares could blind the Reaper's sensors if thrown correctly. Park discovered that the machines had trouble with uneven terrain. Yuna used her navigation skills to predict where they would move next, and Lee learned something important about himself. When everything was hopeless, when the odds were impossible, he felt more alive than he ever had. They held off the Reapers for almost an hour. When their ammunition ran out, they threw rocks. When the rocks were gone, they used pieces of broken metal from destroyed Reaper machines. Finally, a Reaper energy beam hit their cover and the rocks exploded. Lee felt heat wash over him, and then everything went dark. When he woke up, he was in a cave lit by soft blue lights. His head hurt and his left arm was bandaged. Park was sitting next to him, checking his pulse. "How long was I out?" 6 hours. "Kim has a concussion and Yuna broke her wrist, but we're all alive." "The Thylaxi?" "Safe. All of them. Because of what we did, They had enough time to reach the deep caves. The Reapers can't get to them there. Lee sat up slowly and looked around the cave. It was bigger than he had expected, with tunnels leading off in many directions. Thylaxi moved quietly through the passages, carrying supplies and tending to their young ones. Elder Verdanis approached them, walking carefully on the uneven cave floor. "Captain Lee," he said, "my people want to thank you. What you did today, no one has ever done anything like that for us. It's what anyone would have done." The red sun of Kepler 442b cast strange shadows across the burning fields. What once grew tall and green now lay broken and black. Smoke filled the air like a thick blanket. In the distance, massive metal ships hovered above the ground, their metal arms reaching down to tear apart everything they touched. Elder Verdanis pressed his thin fingers against the communication device. His bark-like skin was cracked and dry from the heat. Around him, other Thylaxi moved quickly through the underground tunnels. They carried their young ones and whatever food they could save. Their large eyes were full of fear. "Please," Verdanis spoke into the device. His voice shook. "Anyone who can hear this message, our world is dying. The Void Reapers have come. They take everything, they destroy everything, we need help, please." He had sent this same message every day for 3 months. Every day he hoped someone would answer. Every day, there was only silence. The Thylaxi had once been important. Their farms fed planets across the galaxy. Their special plants could grow anywhere, even in the worst soil. Other species came from far away to buy their food. Trade ships filled their skies. Their cities were full of life and growth. But that was before the synthetic food factories. Before the big companies decided that fake food was cheaper than real food. Before the galaxy decided that the Thylaxi were no longer useful. Now the Void Reapers had come to take what was left. Far away, in the cold darkness of space, Captain Lee Minho sat in his chair on the bridge of the Aegis Dawn. He was young. For a ship captain, only 32 years old. His dark hair was always neat, and his uniform was always clean. But his eyes were tired. 3 years of flying through empty space, mapping planets that no one would ever visit, was wearing him down. "Captain," said Dr. Park Jiwon from her station. She was the ship's science officer and doctor. Her voice was always calm, even when things went wrong. "I'm picking up a signal. It's very weak." Lee turned to look at her. "What kind of signal?" "A distress call. It's coming from the Kepler system. About 2 days away if we change course." Engineer Kim Do-hyun looked up from his work. He was fixing something that had broken again. Everything on their old ship was always breaking. "Kepler 442b? That's Thylaxi, space. I thought they were all dead or gone." Navigator Choi Yuna checked her star charts. She was the youngest member of the crew, but she knew more about space travel than people twice her age. The report said the Thylaxi worlds were abandoned. No strategic value, they said. Lee stood up and walked to the main screen. Stars filled the view, but they all looked the same to him now, cold and distant. "Play the message." The voice that came through the speakers was weak and full of pain. It spoke words in the old trade language that everyone in the galaxy understood. "Please, anyone who can hear this message. Our world is dying. The Void Reapers have come. They take everything. They destroy everything. We need help. Please." The bridge was quiet for a long moment. Lee had heard about the Void Reapers. They were like a disease that spread from planet to planet. They took everything useful and left nothing behind but empty rock. "Captain," Park said softly, "Earth Command's orders were clear. We survey the outer rim systems. We don't get involved in local conflicts." Kim stopped working and looked at the captain. "The Thylaxi are good people. They never hurt anyone. All they ever did was grow food." Yuna was studying her navigation computer. "If we change course now, we'll be 2 days late returning to Earth. Command won't like that." Lee stared at the screen. He thought about the voice in the message, the fear and hope mixed together. He thought about his orders from Earth Command. "Stay on mission. Don't get involved. Come home on time." He also thought about his father, who had died fighting space pirates to protect a small mining colony. His father had ignored orders too. He had said that sometimes doing the right thing was more important than following rules. "How many ships do we have following us?" Lee asked. "None, sir," Una answered. "We're the only Earth ship in this sector." "And how many weapons do we have?" Kim laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "2 mining lasers that we use for cutting rock samples. Some emergency flares, that's about it. This is a science ship, not a warship." Lee nodded. He knew their ship was not built for fighting. The Aegis Dawn was old and slow. Her weapons were meant for studying planets, not battling enemy ships. Against the Void Reapers, they would be like a small bird fighting a dragon. "Sir," Park said, "if the reports are true, the Void Reapers have dozens of ships, maybe hundreds. We wouldn't last 5 minutes against them." "I know," Lee said. He walked back to his captain's chair. "Una, set course for Kepler 442b, maximum speed." The 3 crew members looked at each other. They had served with Lee for 2 years. They trusted him, but this seemed like madness. "Captain," Park tried again, "Earth Command will court-martial you for this. All of us." Lee sat down and pressed the communication button. "This is Captain Lee Minho of the Earth ship Aegis Dawn. We have received your distress call. We are coming to help. Hold on." He turned to look at his crew. They were all staring at him with wide eyes. "I won't order you to follow me on this," Lee said. "If you want, you can put me in the brig and turn the ship around. Go back to Earth and tell them I went crazy." Kim was the first to speak. He closed his toolbox and walked to his weapon station. "My grandfather always said that good people don't abandon other good people." "I'm with you, Captain." Una smiled and started entering new coordinates into her navigation system. "Besides, I've always wanted to see a real space battle, even if we lose." Park sighed and shook her head, but she was also smiling. "Well, someone has to keep you 3 alive long enough to get court-martialed. I suppose that's my job. The Aegis." Dawn turned away from her planned course. Her engines burned bright blue as she accelerated toward the Kepler system. Behind them, the stars they were supposed to survey grew smaller and smaller. 2 days later, they dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system. What they saw made them all go silent. Kepler 442b hung in space like a wounded animal. The planet that had once been green and blue was now brown and red. Smoke clouds covered half the surface. Around the planet, dozens of black ships moved in perfect formations. The Void Reapers were like metal insects, each one the size of a small city. The biggest ships hung in orbit, sending down smaller ships to strip away everything on the surface. Lee could see the mining beams cutting into the planet's crust. They were taking the metals, the minerals, even the soil itself. "My God," whispered Park. On the planet's surface, small groups of lights moved through the darkness. The Thylaxi cities were still fighting, but Lee could see they wouldn't last much longer. "Captain," Kim said from his station, "I'm reading 47 Reaper ships. The smallest one is 10 times our size." Una was studying the tactical display. "They haven't seen us yet. We're too far away and too small." Lee stood up slowly. Through the main screen, he could see the dying planet. Somewhere down there, Elder Verdanus was still sending his messages into space, still hoping someone would come. "Take us in," Lee ordered. "Sir?" Una asked. "You heard me. Take us in, full speed." The Aegis Dawn moved forward into the system. Her small engines pushed her toward the massive enemy fleet. 4 humans in an old science ship flying toward certain death. But they were no longer alone. Down on the planet, the Thylaxi sensors picked up their ship's signal. For the first time in months, Elder Verdanus smiled. Someone had come. Someone had answered their call. The battle for Kepler 442b was about to begin. 3 days before Captain Lee's ship was destroyed, his emergency transmission reached Earth. Admiral Yoon Seokjin was in his office at Earth Fleet Command when the message arrived. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes who had spent 40 years in space. He had seen wars, disasters, and political battles that would have broken younger officers, but what he saw on his screen that day was something new. The transmission was broken and full of static, but the words were clear enough. "This is Captain Lee Minho of the Aegis Dawn. We have engaged Void Reaper forces at Kepler 442b. The Thylaxi people are under attack. Request immediate reinforcements. We will hold position as long as possible." Admiral Yoon played the message 3 times, then he called his aide. "Get me President Kim Soo-young, right now." The president of Earth was in a meeting with trade representatives from the hegemony when her communication device buzzed. Kim Soo-young was a small woman with sharp eyes and a reputation for making hard decisions quickly. She had led Earth through 5 years of careful diplomacy, keeping humanity out of galactic conflicts while building their economy and military. "Ma'am," her aide whispered, "Admiral Yoon says it's urgent." She excused herself from the meeting and took the call in her private office. "What is it, Admiral?" "Captain Lee has engaged enemy forces in the Kepler system. He's requesting support." President Kim was quiet for a moment. "Captain Lee? Isn't he supposed to be doing survey work in the Outer Rim?" "Yes, ma'am. He changed course to respond to a distress call from the Thylaxi." "The Thylaxi? Those plant people that everyone says are extinct?" Admiral Yoon sent her the full report. "They're not extinct. They're under attack by Void Reapers. Captain Lee took his ship to help them." President Kim read the report quickly. Her expression grew more serious with each page. "Admiral, the Aegis Dawn is a science vessel. 4 crew members and mining lasers. What did Captain Lee think he could do against Void Reapers?" "I don't know, ma'am, but he did something. We've lost contact with his ship, but we're picking up other signals from the system. It looks like the battle is still going on." President Kim walked to her window and looked out at the city below. Millions of people went about their daily lives, not knowing that 4 of their fellow humans were fighting impossible odds on the other side of the galaxy. "What are our options, Admiral?" "We could send a rescue mission. 1 fast ship to extract the survivors, if there are any. Or, Admiral," Yoon hesitated, "we could send the 3rd Fleet, show the galaxy that humanity stands by its people, and start a war with every major power that has decided the Thylaxi aren't worth saving." "Possibly." President Kim was quiet for a long time. Finally, she turned back to Admiral Yoon's image on her screen. "Show me everything we know about the Thylaxi." An hour later, President Kim was reading files that made her angry. The Thylaxi had once fed half the galaxy. Their bioengineering skills had ended famines on dozens of worlds. They had never been involved in any wars, never threatened anyone, never asked for anything except fair trade for their crops. But when synthetic food became cheaper than natural food, the big corporations had stopped buying from them. When their economy collapsed, no one had offered help. When they asked to join the Galactic Council for protection, they were told they had nothing to offer. Now they were dying, and the same powers that had abandoned them were telling Earth to stay away. "Ma'am," her aide said softly, "the hegemony. Ambassador is here. He says it's urgent." Ambassador Zeltar was a tall, blue-skinned alien with 4 arms and silver eyes. He represented the most powerful military alliance in the galaxy. He entered President Kim's office without waiting for permission. "President Kim, I trust you have heard about the unfortunate situation in the Kepler system." "I've heard that one. Our ships responded to a distress call." "Yes, well, that was very noble of them. But the situation is under control now. The Void Reapers are simply cleaning up some old debris. Nothing more." President Kim's voice stayed calm, but her eyes were cold. "Debris?" "The Thylaxi worlds were declared economically void 3 years ago. Any remaining population should have been relocated by now. If some stayed behind, well, that was their choice. And Captain Lee and his crew? Regrettably lost, I'm sure. These things happen in space. Very dangerous space travel." Ambassador Zeltar sat down without being invited. "The important thing now is that Earth doesn't make the same mistake. Sending ships to interfere with Reaper operations would be unwise." President Kim smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "Is that a threat, Ambassador?" "Of course not. Simply friendly advice between allies. The hegemony has always valued Earth's contributions to galactic commerce. We would hate for that relationship to change." After the ambassador left, President Kim called Admiral Yoon again. How long would it take to get the Third Fleet to Kepler 442b? 4 days, ma'am. But that's our entire deep space force. If we send them, Earth will be defenseless. How many ships do the Reapers have in that system? Intelligence estimates 50 to 60 vessels, plus whatever reinforcements they might call. And we have 12 heavy cruisers, 36 destroyers, and 48 fighters. The numbers were not good. But President Kim wasn't thinking about numbers anymore. She was thinking about Captain Lee and his crew, fighting impossible odds to help people everyone else had written off. She was also thinking about what kind of galaxy she wanted to leave for future generations. Admiral, I want you to prepare a message to be broadcast on all galactic frequencies. Emergency priority. What should the message say? President Kim was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke words that would change everything. To any species that has been cast aside, forgotten, or deemed unworthy by the great powers of this galaxy, know that humanity stands with you. We will not abandon those in need regardless of their strategic value or economic potential. Admiral Yoon's eyes went wide. Ma'am, that's going to make a lot of powerful people very angry. Good. I'm tired of being polite to people who think some lives are worth more than others. The message went out across the galaxy that night. Within hours, communication networks were buzzing with responses. Some were angry threats from major powers, but many were desperate pleas for help. The mining colony at Asteroid Cluster 7 had been cut off by corporate disputes for 2 years. They were running out of food and medicine. The research station at Sigma Outpost had been abandoned by their government when their project was canceled. 300 scientists and their families were stranded. A refugee fleet from the border. Wars had been drifting in space for 6 months. No one would give them permission to land anywhere. Within 24 hours, Earth had received 47 requests for assistance. President Kim called an emergency session of the Earth Council. The representatives of every nation on Earth gathered. In the Great Hall in Geneva, the debate was intense. "This is madness," said the representative from the European Federation. "We're talking about war with the hegemony, the Trade Federation, maybe even the Crystal Courts. We're talking about doing the right thing," replied the representative from the African Union. "The right thing?" The Asian Coalition representative stood up. "The right thing is to protect our own people first. We have 6 billion humans to worry about." President Kim listened to the arguments for 3 hours. Finally, she stood up to speak. "Representatives, we have a choice to make. We can continue to be careful. We can keep our heads down, follow the rules set by others, and hope that someday we'll be strong enough to matter." She paused and looked around the room. "Or we can decide that we already matter, that human lives and human values are worth fighting for, even when the odds are against us." She activated a holographic display showing the galaxy. Hundreds of worlds appeared with data about their populations and status. "Look at this map. See how many worlds are marked as economically non-viable or strategically insignificant. Each one of those worlds has millions of people living on it. People with families, dreams, hopes for the future. People who have been written off by the powers that rule this galaxy." The room was completely quiet. Captain Lee and his crew didn't ask permission to help the Thylaxy. They saw people in trouble and they acted. Now they're probably dead. And the people they tried to save will be dead soon too. President Kim's voice grew stronger. "We can let their sacrifice be meaningless. Or we can show the galaxy that some things are more important than profit margins and political calculations." The vote was close. 51 nations voted to send the fleet, 49 voted against. But it was enough. Admiral Yoon received his orders at 800 the next morning. "Take the Third Fleet to Kepler 442b. Extract our people if possible. If not, make sure the galaxy remembers what happens when you mess with humans and their friends." The fleet launched 6 hours later. 12 heavy cruisers, 36 destroyers, and 48 fighters, all painted with the blue and white colors of Earth. It was the largest military force humanity had ever sent beyond their own solar system. As they jumped to hyperspace, they carried with them something more important than weapons or supplies. They carried a message that would spread across the galaxy faster than any ship could fly. Humanity would not abandon those in need. Admiral Yoon stood on the bridge of the Earth battleship Incheon as it dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system. What he saw made his blood run cold. The planet Kepler 442b looked like a piece of fruit that had been partially eaten by insects. Huge chunks of the surface were missing, leaving dark scars where cities and forests used to be. Around the wounded world, 63 Void Reaper ships moved in organized patterns, like predators feeding on a kill. "Admiral," reported Captain Bae Tae-hyung from the tactical station. "Enemy force strength is higher than our estimates. They have 8 dreadnoughts, 24 heavy cruisers, and 31 destroyers." Admiral Yoon studied the enemy formation. The Reapers had arranged themselves in 3 layers around the planet. The outer layer was made of fast attack ships. The middle layer had the heavy weapons platforms. The inner layer, closest to the planet, was where the massive harvester ships were strip mining everything they could find. "Any sign of Captain Lee's ship?" "Negative, sir. We're detecting debris that matches the Aegis Dawn's hull signature, but..." Captain Bae paused. "Sir, we're also detecting something else." "What?" "Explosions on the planet's surface. Small ones, but definitely artificial. Someone down there is still fighting." Admiral Yoon allowed himself a small smile. "That sounds like Lee." The communications officer looked up from her station. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Reaper fleet. They want to talk." "Put it through." The main screen filled with the image of a Void Reaper command unit. It looked like a mechanical skeleton wrapped in black metal, with glowing red eyes and a voice that sounded like grinding gears. "Earth vessels, you are interfering with authorized salvage operations. Withdraw immediately or face destruction." Admiral Yoon stepped forward. "This is Admiral Yoon of the Earth Fleet. These are not salvage operations, this is genocide, and we're here to stop it." The Reaper's mechanical voice showed no emotion. "The Thylaxi are economically extinct. Their continued existence serves no purpose. You have 60 seconds to withdraw before we open fire." Admiral Yoon looked around his bridge. His crew was waiting for orders. These were good people who had volunteered to fly across the galaxy to help strangers they had never met. They deserved to know what they were facing. "All ships, this is Admiral Yoon. You can see the odds for yourselves. The enemy has twice our numbers and better weapons. If any ship wants to withdraw, now is the time. I won't think less of you." He waited 30 seconds. No ship moved. "All right then," Admiral Yoon said. "Attack pattern Delta. Target the harvester ships first. Maybe we can save what's left of the planet." The Earth fleet spread out and accelerated toward the enemy. Their blue engines left trails of light across the darkness as they charged into battle. The Void Reapers met them with a wall of energy fire. The space between the two fleets filled with deadly beams of red and orange light. The Earth destroyers were faster and more agile, but the Reaper ships had thicker armor and bigger guns. Within minutes, the battle became chaos. Ships twisted and turned through 3-dimensional space, trying to get clear shots at their enemies while avoiding the incoming fire. Explosions lit up the darkness as both sides took casualties. On the planet below, Captain Lee heard the sounds of battle in space and looked up through a crack in the cave ceiling. He could see flashes of light in the sky as ships fought and died far above. "Is that?" Elder Verdanis asked. "Earthships," Lee said with amazement. "They came. They actually came." Dr. Park was monitoring their improvised radio. "Captain, I'm picking up Earth Fleet communications. Admiral Yoon is in command." Lee grinned. He had served under Admiral Yoon early in his career. The old man was tough as steel and twice as stubborn. "What's their situation?" "Not good. They're outnumbered and outgunned, but they're giving as good as they get." Lee turned to the group of Thylaxi and humans that had gathered around him. Over the past week, they had become an unlikely family. The Thylaxi had taught the humans about their planet's geography and biology. The humans had taught the Thylaxi about tactics and improvised weapons. "This is our chance," Lee announced. "While the Reapers are busy fighting the fleet, we can hit their ground operations." Engineer Kim looked up from the explosive device he was building. "Captain, we have maybe 30 bombs and 4 working guns. There are thousands of Reaper ground units out there. We're not going to fight them head-on, we're going to be smart about it. Lee activated a holographic map that Dr. Park had created from their scouting missions. It showed the planet's surface with all the Reaper mining operations, marked in red. The Reapers are machines, they follow patterns. Every 12 hours they send supply convoys from their landing sites to their mining operations. These convoys follow the same routes every time. Navigator Yuna pointed to several locations on the map. If we hit the supply lines, we can slow down their mining operations, force them to divert ships from the space battle to protect their ground forces. Elder Verdanis studied the map with his large eyes. My people know secret paths through the underground caves. We can move without being detected. What about weapons? Asked one of the younger Thylaxi. Kim smiled and patted a large bag full of improvised explosives. We've been busy, but we're also going to use the planet itself against them. He explained his plan. The Thylaxi were master bioengineers. They had spent weeks creating special plants and bacteria that could eat through metal and disrupt electronic systems. If they could introduce these organisms into the Reaper supply chain, the EI machines would literally fall apart from the inside. It's poetic justice, Dr. Park said. They came here to harvest the planet's resources. Instead, the planet is going to digest them. The first raid happened 6 hours later. A Reaper supply convoy was moving through a narrow canyon when the rocks above them suddenly exploded. Boulders crashed down, blocking the path ahead and behind. Before the machines could react, small groups of Thylaxi and humans emerged from hidden caves. They threw bags of bioengineered spores at the Reaper vehicles. The spores looked harmless, like pollen or dust. But within minutes, they began eating through the machine's metal surfaces. Electronics sparked and failed as the organic agents spread through their systems. The Reapers tried to fight back, but their weapons malfunctioned. Their communication systems went dead. One by one, the mighty war machines ground to a halt and began falling apart. Lee's team hit 6 more convoys that day. Each attack was different, but the result was always the same. The Reaper ground forces were being systematically destroyed by an enemy they couldn't see or predict. In space, Admiral Yoon noticed the change immediately. "Sir," reported Captain Bay, "several Reaper dreadnoughts are breaking formation. They're heading for the planet." "Excellent. That means our people down there are making progress." But the space battle was still going badly for Earth. They had lost 8 destroyers and 2 cruisers. The Reapers had lost more ships, but they had started with twice as many. "Admiral," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission. It's not from the Reapers." "Who then?" "Unknown. Ships approaching from hyperspace. Lots of them." Admiral Yoon felt his heart skip. Were these Reaper reinforcements? If so, the battle was over. The new ships dropped out of hyperspace in a flash of light. But these weren't Void Reapers. The lead ship was a battered mining vessel from Asteroid Cluster 7. Behind it came cargo ships, passenger transports, research vessels, and even some old military ships that had been retired years ago. There were dozens of them, representing species from across the galaxy. "This is Captain Min Hyok of the mining ship Stonecutter," came a voice over the communication system. "We received President Kim's message. We're here to help." "Admiral," Yoon stared at the screen in amazement. "Captain, those are civilian ships. You're not equipped for this kind of battle. Neither were the humans who answered our distress call 2 years ago, but they came anyway. Now it's our turn." More ships appeared. The research station at Sigma Outpost had sent their entire fleet of science vessels, hastily equipped with weapons. A group of refugee ships from the border wars had armed themselves with whatever they could find. Even stranger allies arrived. A convoy of trade ships whose crews had been cheated by the major corporations. A wing of patrol boats from systems that had been abandoned by their governments. Even some pirates who had heard about the battle and decided they didn't like bullies. Within an hour, Admiral Yoon's small fleet had been joined by over 200 ships. They were all different sizes and types. Many of them were barely space-worthy. Their crews were farmers, miners, scientists, refugees, and outcasts. But they had all come to fight. "All ships, this is Admiral Yoon. Form up behind the Earth fleet. We're going to show these Reapers what happens when you mess with the Forgotten." The combined fleet charged at the Void Reapers like an avalanche. The enemy had better ships and better weapons, but they were facing something they had never encountered before. They were facing hope. On the planet below, Elder Verdanus and Captain Lee watched the battle from a hilltop cave. The sky was full of explosions and streaking lights as hundreds of ships fought in the darkness. "Your people came," Verdanus said quietly. "After all this time, someone finally came." Lee nodded. "That's what we do. We don't leave our friends behind." The Reaper harvester ship hung in the sky above the ruins of the Thylaxi capital like a metal moon. It was 3 kilometers long and covered with mining equipment that looked like the legs of a giant spider. For weeks it had been tearing apart, everything below it, consuming the remains of a once beautiful city. Captain Lee and his team approached it through the underground tunnels that Elder Verdanus had shown them. 200 Thylaxi moved silently through the darkness, carrying bags of bioengineered spores and improvised explosives. They had practiced this assault for 3 days, but everyone knew the odds were impossible. "Captain," whispered Dr. Park, "I'm reading massive energy signatures from the harvester. Its defensive systems are fully active." "How massive?" "Enough to sterilize the entire area if they detect us." Lee nodded. He had expected this. The Reapers weren't stupid. They knew their ground forces were being picked apart by an invisible enemy. The harvester would be protected by every weapon they had left. "Remember the plan," Lee said to the group. "We don't need to destroy the ship. We just need to poison it from the inside." Engineer Kim checked his equipment one more time. He had spent days creating a special bioweapon that could spread through the harvester's ventilation system. Once it was released, every organic component in the ship would begin to break down. "The delivery system is the problem," Kim said quietly. "Someone has to get inside the ship and release the spores manually." "I'll do it," Lee said. "No," Elder Verdanus interrupted. "This is our world, our responsibility." "With respect, Elder, you don't know human technology well enough to navigate their ship systems. Then we go together." Lee looked at the old Thylaxi leader. Verdanus had been a farmer and a politician, not a warrior. But the weeks of fighting had changed him. His large eyes now held a hardness that hadn't been there before. "Together," Lee agreed. Above them, the space battle continued to rage. Admiral Yoon's combined fleet was holding its own against the Void Reapers, but just barely. The Earth ships were fast and well-trained. The civilian vessels that had joined them were brave but inexperienced. They were taking heavy casualties. "Admiral," reported Captain Bay from the tactical station, "we've lost the cargo ship New Dawn and 2 of the mining vessels. The refugee fleet is requesting permission to withdraw." Admiral Yoon studied the battle display. His fleet had started with 48 ships. Now they were down to 31. The civilian allies had lost even more. But the Reapers were hurting, too. Their perfect formation was broken and several of their dreadnoughts were showing damage. "Negative. Tell the refugee fleet to hold position. We're not leaving without our people." "Sir, if the harvester ship joins the battle, we won't have enough firepower to stop it." Admiral Yoon knew Captain Bay was right. The harvester was the size of a battle station and had weapons to match. If it stopped mining and started fighting, the battle would be over in minutes. "Then we better hope Captain Lee can work miracles," the Admiral said. On the planet below, Lee and Verdanus were crawling through a maintenance tunnel toward the harvester's docking bay. The tunnel was barely wide enough for a human, and Elder Verdanus had to fold his tall frame into an uncomfortable position to fit. "Captain," Verdanus whispered, "there's something I need to tell you. About my people." "What about them?" "We're not just farmers. We used to be warriors long ago, before we learned to grow things instead of destroying them." Lee looked back at the alien leader. "What changed?" "We had a war that lasted 300 years. It destroyed half our world and killed billions of our people. When it was over, the survivors decided that growing life was better than ending it. They reached the end of the tunnel. Through a small grate, they could see the harvester's docking bay. It was enormous, filled with mining equipment and transport vehicles. Reaper drones moved back and forth, loading harvested materials. "Why are you telling me this?" Lee asked. Because if we survive this, my people will remember how to fight. And I'm not sure that's a good thing. Lee understood. The Thylaxi had chosen peace over war, but the Reapers had taken that choice away from them. Now they would have to live with the consequences. Elder, there's something you need to understand about humans. We've been fighting wars for our entire history, but we've also learned something important. What? The best warriors are the ones who fight so others don't have to. They removed the grate and slipped into the docking bay. The Reaper drones were focused on their work and didn't notice two small figures moving through the shadows. Kim's bioweapon was contained in a device that looked like a simple breathing mask. Once activated, it would release spores into the air that would spread through the ship's atmosphere system. The spores were designed to eat the organic components that held the Reaper technology together. There, Verdanis pointed to a large ventilation intake. If we can reach that, the spores will spread throughout the ship. They made their way carefully across the docking bay, hiding behind mining equipment and transport vehicles. Lee's heart was pounding so loud he was sure the Reaper drones would hear it. They were halfway to the ventilation system when everything went wrong. A Reaper security drone rounded a corner and spotted them immediately. Its red sensors locked onto the intruders and alarms began blaring throughout the ship. "Run!" Lee shouted. They sprinted toward the ventilation intake as more security drones converged on their position. Energy beams scorched the deck around them, leaving smoking craters in the metal floor. Verdanis reached the ventilation system first. His long arms allowed him to climb up to the intake faster than Lee could follow. But as he reached for the bioweapon device, an energy beam caught him in the shoulder. The elder Thylaxi cried out in pain but didn't let go. He activated the device and threw it into the ventilation intake just as more drones arrived. "It's done," he shouted to Lee. "Now we run." But Elder Verdanis couldn't run anymore. The energy beam had damaged his arm badly, and green blood was flowing from the wound. "Go," he told Lee. "Save your people." Lee looked at the injured alien, then at the exit that was 20 meters away. He could probably make it if he ran now. Instead, he picked up Elder Verdanis and carried him toward the exit. "What are you doing?" Verdanis gasped. "Something stupid," Lee replied. "But humans are good at that." They didn't make it to the exit. More security drones surrounded them, and Lee was forced to take cover behind a mining vehicle. He checked Verdanis' wound and tried to stop the bleeding. "Captain," Verdanis said weakly, "the spores are spreading. Can you feel it?" Lee could indeed feel something. The air was getting thicker and there was a strange smell like rotting vegetation. Around them, Reaper drones were starting to malfunction. Their movements became jerky and uncoordinated. How long until it takes effect? Not long, minutes maybe. But they didn't have minutes. The security drones were closing in, and their cover wouldn't protect them much longer. That's when Lee heard a familiar sound. Human voices shouting in Korean, "This way, move, move, move!" A squad of Earth Marines burst into the docking bay led by Colonel Bae Tae-hyung. They were wearing full combat armor and carrying weapons that could punch through Reaper hull plating. "Captain." "Lee!" Colonel Bae called out. "Stay down! We're coming to get you!" The Marines engaged the Reaper security drones in a fierce firefight. Their weapons were designed specifically for fighting machines, and they cut through the enemy forces like they were made of paper. "How did you get here?" Lee asked as the Marines reached his position. "Admiral Yoon sent us down in assault shuttles," Colonel Bae explained, while his medic treated Elder Verdanis. "We've been fighting our way through this ship for the past hour." "The bioweapon? Working perfectly. Half the ship's systems have shut down already. We just need to get you out of here before the whole thing falls apart." They made their way back through the ship's corridors, which were now filled with smoke and sparks from failing systems. Reaper drones lay motionless on the deck, their organic components dissolved by the bioweapon. As they reached the shuttle that would take them back to the fleet, Elder Verdanis grabbed Lee's arm. "Captain, look." Through the shuttle's window they could see the space battle above, but something had changed. The Reaper fleet was breaking formation and retreating toward the edge of the system. "They're running," Lee said with amazement. "Without the Harvester, they can't complete their mission here," Colonel Bae explained. And their ground forces are falling apart thanks to your bioweapons. They're cutting their losses. The shuttle lifted off from the dying harvester ship and flew toward Admiral Yoon's flagship. Below them, Kepler 442b looked different than it had weeks ago. The planet was wounded and scarred, but it was still alive. More importantly, its people were alive. 2 days later, Captain Lee stood in the rebuilt communication center in the Thylaxi capital. The city was mostly ruins, but the survivors were already starting to rebuild. They worked alongside human engineers and volunteers from the dozen species that had joined the battle. President Kim Soo-young's image appeared on the main screen. She looked tired but pleased. Captain Lee, on behalf of Earth and the Human Alliance, I want to thank you. Your actions have changed everything. I just did what anyone would do, ma'am. No, Captain. You did what humans do. You saw people in trouble, and you helped them without asking what was in it for you.